الحمد لله نستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اصبروا وصابروا ورابطوا واتقوا الله لعلكم تفلحون بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات أولئك هم خير البرية جزاؤهم عند ربهم جنات عدن تجري من تحتها الأنهار خالدين فيها أبدا رضي الله عنهم ورضوا عنه ذلك لمن خشي ربه. Assalamu alaikum, my dear respected brothers and sisters. May the peace and blessings of Allah be upon you all. It is my incredible pleasure and honor to be able to give you a khutbah on this beloved day of Jumaa. I just want to mention that when it is Jumaa, we appreciate the incredible blessings that Allah has given us on this day. I know it's very difficult for us while we're working. We have so many other concerns and considerations in our life that sometimes it becomes a ritual. But remember that Allah has blessed this day. It is a day of mini Eid. And even little things that you do with the intention of doing it for the sake of Jumu'ah, you'll get rewarded. So even if you decide to wear a special pair of socks that you don't wear any other day, inshallah Allah will reward you for that. Even if you decide to call someone with the intention, even if you called them yesterday, but with the intention that this is Jumu'ah, and I want to bless and I want to greet them, inshallah you'll be given blessings for that and reward for that. Just a few things about the khutbah. The khutbah is part of worship, so we have to make sure, I'm sure you've probably been reminded of this before, that you're not talking, you observe the same essential rules that you observe when you're praying. The scholars understand that's the reason why the Jumu'ah prayer is shortened to 2 rak'ah is because the khutbah itself accounts for 2 of those rak'ah. So treat it like ibadah. Try not to talk. In fact, you shouldn't talk. Eating is not allowed. Chewing gum, etc. Don't watch any videos, please. But inshallah, we will try. I won't keep it too long. We'll try and finish by 1:40 with the prayer, inshallah. Now, today I just want to ask everyone a question. Who are we? Why are we here? What do we do? More specifically, the questions I want to ask relate to the Islam we want to practice and how we want to present ourselves to the world. We have a choice in everything we do in this life on how we do it. How we speak to people, how we act with people, what we do with our lives. And ultimately, at a very basic level, we will be judged on those choices. And the core choice that we have as Muslims, as individuals and as a community, is the question, what kind of Islam do we want to live? Do we want to live an Islam of pettiness, an Islam of division, an Islam based purely on a rigid understanding of Scripture? Or do we want to have an Islam which is based on openness, on being sensible, on allowing people to be comfortable in their own skin? The reason I ask this is because we live in a world now where, even compared to just 20 years ago, access to information about Islam, about the Scripture is very easy. Just 20, 30 years ago, if you wanted to read about certain hadith, about certain interpretations of Quranic verses, it was actually very difficult. You'd have to go speak to a scholar, you'd have to go to a specific library, find a text. With the advent of easy information with the internet, everyone pretty much has access to anything that's ever been written by Islam, whether it's been translated or not. If you can read the language, you have access to that information. The problem that we now have is there are people who learn a little bit, and through that little bit of learning they think they know more than anyone else. And this is a problem that affects all knowledge. One of the great understandings we have in the Islamic tradition is that knowledge allows a person to go through 3 phases, and until you've got to the last phase, you're not truly knowledgeable. The first phase of knowledge is always that of arrogance. You learn something, 99% of people don't know that, you think you know everything. But push through that phase. Try not to be arrogant. And the more you learn, the more you realize that there's so much to learn. And when you get to that stage, you realize that actually there's so much I may never know it all. And you become humble. And that's a phase when you can start. And that's a phase when you can start to teach. When you have that humility. Arrogant people who have learned a little bit should never be allowed to teach. Because they think they know everything, but they don't realize that there's so much left to learn. When you start feeling that humility that actually I may not know that much, that's when you can start teaching. But the last phase is something that the vast majority of people will never get to. And that is, you know so much that you have an understanding that you will never know everything. What you will know, at its best, will be a drop in an ocean compared to what you can know. And you understand that you will always be ignorant. And that phase of knowing that you're ignorant is the highest level of knowledge. But the vast majority of people will never get to that humility phase, the phase of being ignorant, of knowing they're ignorant. And the reason I mention that, sounds very abstract, is because unfortunately so much of our, I don't want to say leaders necessarily, but the people advising us are the people who are still stuck at a level which is most conducive to being arrogant. And you see that in their behavior. You see that in how we represent ourselves as Muslims. We get so fascinated and so obsessed with little things. And I'll give you an example of a gentleman that I know who is relatively knowledgeable, but who's very obsessed with some of the smallest sunnahs. One of his biggest bugbears is you must always sit down when you drink water. It is a sunnah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there's no doubt about that. But he, if you ever saw someone standing up drinking water, would always make a point of telling him. And a colleague of his who came to visit him after a long time to, I can't remember, it must have been a university setting where he was at, he saw him standing at the water fountain drinking. He said, brother, it's better that you inshallah sit down and drink water. And the brother said, Jazakallah khair, and he continued standing and drank. A few weeks later, saw him doing the same thing. He said, brother, again, I think it's a good idea, inshallah, as a sunnah, the Prophet said you should sit down to drink water. The brother once again said, Jazakallah khair, continued to stand and finish his water and then walked off. The third time he saw him a few weeks later, he lost his temper. He said, brother, I don't know why you're not doing this. I've told you so many times, don't disobey the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The brother looked down and said, my dear friend, I wish I didn't have to tell you this, but just 5 weeks ago I had an operation on my sacrum and I cannot sit down without special cushion. So I would appreciate if you please don't tell me to do something that you know nothing about. And that's incredibly embarrassing. It's embarrassing for this man, and it's incredibly arrogant for this man to assume he knows everything about the circumstances. You give the reminder once, if he doesn't want to do it, it's up to that person. There are people who do similar things with lots of the most minute of sunnah. I knew a man who was so obsessed with this most obscure sunnah that when you eat meat, you must pick up the entire piece of meat and not pick the meat off the bone, because the Prophet ﷺ said don't do that. And he used to get really upset when people didn't do that. But ultimately, people like that, whether they realize it or not, whatever their intentions may be, you're pushing people away from Islam. There are people who are barely clinging on to this religion. They may come from families where Islam hasn't been practiced, but they're trying their best. They're trying to do the best they can. They come into their prayer. Maybe their prayer isn't perfect. But if you're very harsh with them, if you're very intolerant of their imperfections, you'll push them away. I know so many brothers and sisters who came to Islam through their own means, but were pushed away. It might be a brother whose beard wasn't long enough, or maybe his trousers were too far below the ankles, or maybe a sister whose hijab wasn't being worn exactly the right way when she first started wearing it. But they become demoralized. And instead of persisting with the religion, they decide, actually, I'll go and do something else with my time. Now, with that context in mind, we have to ask ourselves the question, what kind of Islam are we going to be practicing as individuals, and society. Because I'll tell you something, an Islam of rigidity is still Islam. As long as you're following the core principles of Islam, it's still Islam. But it's not an Islam that I think any of us would like to follow. The truly beautiful aspect of this religion is the fact that Allah has allowed for people to practice in a way that they are comfortable. It is acceptable for people who are the most basic, the most ignorant, the most unsophisticated, as long as they're doing the basics, Allah will accept their Islam. A Bedouin came to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he came and spoke to him very harshly. He said, "I've heard that if I just pray 5 times a day, I give zakat, I go on Hajj, and I fast, and I declare my faith in Allah, I'll go to Jannah. Is that right?" Literally in that manner. And the Prophet said, "No, yes, that's right." He said, "That's all I'll do. I promise I'll do nothing else." And he walked off. Forget the harshness of this man, but the Prophet ﷺ didn't admonish him. He said, if this man is true in his promise, then inshallah he will be successful. And just remember that Allah does allow for simplicity in our religion. The religion also allows for people who are the most sophisticated and who want to push themselves. There's this concept of wara', of being very scrupulous in your religion, of even avoiding things which might be halal. If you want to be like that, go for it. If you're so particular about small things because you feel that this brings you closer to Allah, go for it. But you cannot force wara' on other people, even your own family. Do it yourself, but don't force it on others, don't expect it on other people. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Taha said, "Ma anzalna alayka al-Qur'ana litashqa." We didn't reveal this Qur'an for you to be miserable. That's not what this is. But there's so many people, through their religion, through their practice of the religion, through the way they speak to other people, they're making people miserable. They're quite literally making people miserable. And there are people who might be interested in Islam, whether they're Muslim or not Muslim, they're literally being pushed away in droves. At a time where people are interested, they're spiritually devoid of anything in this life, Islam should be filling that spiritual void. We should let people into the religion. It doesn't matter what faults they have, doesn't matter what hang-ups they have, doesn't matter if maybe they don't pray properly, maybe they're making some sin. If they're praying, if they believe in Allah, accept them, be there for them, and help them through love, not through punishing them for making simple mistakes that they weren't aware of. I can give you a very beautiful saying of Ali radiallahu anhu, who said that Islam in its unity as one body, doesn't matter how many differences there are in that body, how many divisions there are, is infinitely better than an Islam of 100 sects, each one of them pure in their way too. And I think for us, my brothers, there's something very, very important for us to learn. And I pray inshallah that Allah can give us a bit of understanding of this concept that sometimes maybe we don't think about. We're not always cognizant of that when we're practicing the religion, when we're talking to others about the religion. And I pray that Allah opens our hearts to a more accepting form of Islam. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله. Before I start, I've just been asked to just remind some people about a couple of things. I've been specifically told that I should tell people that you should park like Muslims. I can't interpret that any further apart from just be considerate, be kind, be open, don't be harsh, think about other people's rights when they park. They do have rights. And if perhaps this time you made a mistake, try do better next time, inshallah. And also, I think with the planned expansion or sort of purchase of land, I think there is a sort of pledge form outside, and I've been asked if people could please just take a photo of that and then in your own time use that to make a pledge, inshallah. That would be very much appreciated. Now, I would like to finish. I've got so much to say, but I don't want to take too long. I'd like to finish in a few minutes. I want to remind everyone about a saying that Aisha radiallahu anha once said. She said that had the Prophet of Islam come to us and just said to everyone, don't do this, don't do that, don't fornicate, don't drink, that's the first thing he said, nobody would have listened to him. Not a single soul that said, we will do it even more just because you're telling us not to. But how did he come? What was the first thing he said? What was the first thing he did? He taught people about love. He taught people about peace. When people came to religion, he said, Afshu salam, spread peace. Don't worry about the rituals just as yet. There are so many people who are so obsessed with the outer aspects of Islam that they forget that it's actually the seeds of Islam in your heart which will save you on the day of judgment. We get obsessed with growing beards, wearing of jilbabs, wearing of hijab, especially when people first come into the religion. It's not to say these aren't important, but these should be organic and come from true faith. I give the example of the difference between two trees. One tree is dead. You pick it up, you glue it to the ground, you take every single leaf and you glue it back. It looks like a tree. Compare that to a real tree, which took decades to grow. Started with a seed. The seed planted incredible roots, and the roots manifest as a trunk, and the trunk over time spread and manifest to beautiful leaves, which are real and organic. What's going to happen to each one of these trees when it's afflicted by a storm? The tree that is basically just a shell, a husk, will fall over with the smallest of winds, but the strongest tree, the tree that grew organically, will be able to resist even the strongest of storms. And that's the same with our faith in Islam. If our faith in Islam is brittle, we're essentially just got a beard, or we're wearing a hijab, even though none of this makes any real sense to us, inshallah, Allah will accept it. But I have seen so many Muslims, brothers and sisters over time, who literally have practiced their faith in a brittle manner, not developed the inner soul, the inner spirit of Islam, and the smallest of tragedies hit them, and literally all their leaves fall off, all the outer fall off, and many people leave Islam. I'm not joking, many people leave Islam just with the smallest of tragedies. But the person who has developed their iman over time, they weren't too worried about the outward initially. Yes, they prayed, they did everything, but they developed their iman first and foremost. And they allowed their Islam to organically grow, to actually then have leaves which are the external manifestation of Islam. I will tell you, these kinds of people, their faith inshallah is so strong, it doesn't matter what calamity they see, they will remain firm. Maybe some of the leaves will fall off, maybe they won't have as big a beard, maybe they won't pray with the same amount of iman all the time, maybe they won't do the same ibadah they used to, but their internal faith will never be shaken, inshallah. And I just want to give you the final example before I finish. You have no idea, we have no idea who is someone that is blessed in the eyes of Allah. We have no idea. We may see the most simple man who's doing nothing, and we may think, you know what, this man could be doing more, but you have no idea what his station is with Allah. And you may see the greatest sheikh, and you have no idea how low he is in Allah's arms. One sheikh that I know, he told us a story many years ago, about a man who lived in the United States. He was in his 20s, I think this was in the mid-1990s. And he was just an ordinary man, wasn't a Muslim. He was a Caucasian. One of the things he really enjoyed in life was to smoke weed. I'm sure none of you know what weed is here. But he used to spend probably 2 or 3 hours of his day after work going to the same place, a park which was well known for people to smoke this substance. And he would just go and relax, or so he said. And by having gone there on so many occasions, he got to know everyone that was there. One day he noticed that there was a different man there he'd never seen before, and he was actually rolling his drug in a very different way. He'd never seen someone do that before, so he was very curious. So he went and talked to the man. It turned out the man was from Morocco.
And he'd never heard of Morocco, but he remembered somewhere that perhaps people from this part of the world might be Muslim, so he started talking about Islam. Now, it transpires that this man wasn't a particularly religious man. He didn't pray, he didn't fast, he had girlfriends, he used to drink, he obviously smoked weed. But during that time, they had a pretty intense conversation while under the influence of this drug about Islam. It was 2 or 3 hours. The man who was from Morocco didn't know that much, but he just told him whatever he knew. And they parted ways, never to see each other again. The Sheikh said, that man was me. Not the Moroccan man, the Caucasian man. That was me 20 years ago. Because of that one conversation I had with a man who wasn't a very good Muslim, the seeds of Islam were planted in my heart. And I took those seeds and I grew it. And alhamdulillah, 10 years ago, I became alim and I've been teaching the more. SubhanAllah, that was so beautiful. But the thing which really struck me was during this time when we were listening to this talk, one of the other Muslims started to talk in a derogatory manner about that Moroccan Muslim. He said, what an awful Muslim he was, doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, what an awful example for us. And the Shaykh said, never say that. It is because of him that I am a Muslim today. Every single thing that I have done which is good, a copy of that will be deposited on his account on the Day of Judgment. He will be resurrected. He doesn't know where I am. I don't know if he's alive. He will be resurrected on the Day of Judgment with a mountain of deeds he had no idea where it came from because of that one conversation under the influence of drugs. So do not ever assume that this man who you think is not a good Muslim is not seen as high in the state in Allah's eyes. We have no idea. We literally have no idea who has been blessed, who hasn't been blessed. Don't be one of those Muslims who think they know better than others. So my dear brothers and sisters, I think that's probably enough, I suspect. I could talk for many, many more hours, but I, inshallah, at some other time. I pray to Allah that Allah gives us a really deep understanding of our religion and makes us one of those people that really thinks about what it is we're doing with our lives and how we're spending our lives and how we're treating other people and what our actions actually mean and what effect they're having not just on ourselves and on our souls but also the souls of other people. And I pray inshallah Allah guides us to the right path, the path of those who were guided before us and the path of those who were blessed before us and keeps us away from the path of those who went astray, Muslim or non-Muslim. ربنا تقبل منا انك انت السميع العليم وتب علينا انك انت التواب الرحيم ربنا اتنا في الدنيا حسنه وفي الاخره حسنه وقنا عذاب النار ربنا لا تؤاخذنا ان نسينا واخطانا ربنا ولا تحمل علينا اصرا كما حمله على الذين من قبلنا ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقه لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا انت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين واقم الصلاه ان الصلاه